Hey guys, Torque17 here, bringing you my first episode of Tested, where you, the viewers, choose a ship and loadout for me to fly, and I go into detail about that ship and each weapon, and kind of talk about the most effective way to use that ship and weapon loadout in Arena Commander. This week you guys chose the Hornet F7C as Ghost, as well as the Mantis GT220 is my favorite weapon, and the 9 series Longswords. So 2 ballistic weapons and a stealthy ship. So this should be a really good time. Let's get into it. Alright guys, before we jump into any gameplay here, let's kind of discuss the ship and weapons that we're going to be using today. We're using the Hornet F7CS Ghost, which is basically in this patch, which we are on patch 1.1.1 of the Alpha of Star Citizen, is the most defensive ship that we have currently. There is a bit of an overpowered weapon that's currently being used, and that is the cross-section missile. It is basically unavoidable unless you're flying this ship. How this ship avoids those missiles is a bit different than your typical missile avoidance with a flare or a chaff or something like that. It is extremely difficult to lock on a CS missile on a Hornet Ghost. So it pretty much renders that overpowered weapon useless, which really levels the playing field, which I've really enjoyed. The next thing I'd like to talk about is my favorite weapon, which is the GT220 Mantises. They are a super high DPS weapon. They're actually the highest DPS weapon in the game currently. They are a size 3 weapon with 20 damage per round, but they fire so many rounds per second that their DPS is 300. Their range is 2160 meters. Their muzzle velocity is 1200 meters per second, and they have an ammo box of 750 rounds, and they come with 2 of them, so there is 1500 rounds per weapon. The next weapon that I'd like to talk about is the 9 series Longswords. They are a bit lower DPS, so their damage per round is 27, so higher than the Mantises, but they fire much slower, so their DPS is 90. I haven't seen too many people use these, and this is probably the reason why. I think people wanted to see a fully ballistic loadout and just not all Mantises. They wanted to see 2 weapons, so I think they just kind of threw out the name Longswords and we went with it. Their range is 1980 meters, so slightly less than the Mantises, as well as their muzzle velocity being a bit lower at 1100 meters per second. They also have less ammo per box, which is 200 rounds per box, and it comes with 2, so 400 rounds per weapon. Now that we've kind of gone into detail about the weapons and the ship, let's kind of go in, let's get some gameplay video out there and just really discuss what the most effective way to use this ship with this loadout in Arena Commander. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is that little reticle in the middle there. The reason it is a large circle rather than 2 separate reticles for 2 different weapons is that their muzzle velocity is so similar that they essentially combined both reticles into one. So when you see that giant circle in the middle, when you're playing Arena Commander, that's what that means. Essentially what I'm doing now is I am trying to fly between some cover to avoid some locks and kind of fly under the radar a little bit and fire at targets that aren't paying attention to me. Going head-on against targets with this loadout is not recommended. A lot of the times people will be using Omni-Sky 6s, mass drivers, more than 2 Mantises, and maybe even some laser repeaters. Those are far higher DPS loadouts than what we're using right now, and it's not recommended to go head-on against targets like that. Once they see you, you got no choice. So I got lucky there and did enough damage to him before he saw us. So we get into another head-on combat situation here, and I actually choose to run, fire a couple chaff, hope to avoid that confrontation, and I was lucky enough that our good friend Eric McKetton ran into an asteroid and died. This next one, he already knows we're here, so we're kind of strafing around, avoiding fire as much as possible, seeing if we can get a cockpit shot off on him. But what actually ends up happening here is, as we're getting ready to do some damage, our ballistics go dry, and we have to wait for our mantises to come back online. Given those longswords DPS is so low, you really are relying on the mantises with this loadout. So you're kind of using the mantises until they overheat a bit, and then the longswords don't really overheat, so you're just hoping they hit a cockpit and kill somebody at that point. So this next confrontation is kind of a good example of not wanting to take on someone in a what I call a chicken situation, where you're both just firing head on at each other, and whoever dies first is chicken. So he has a way higher DPS than us in that spot, and you really want to avoid those confrontations at all costs. Going against a Avenger there is much easier. They only have 3 weapons, and their DPS is typically much lower than ours. So going head on in that situation is pretty much a guaranteed kill, and that's why we ended up with one there. A 325A, kind of a similar situation. You don't necessarily want to be going head on against them, but cockpit shots are pretty easy to grab on those. So you can rely on your mantises and hope to sneak a cockpit shot off, strafe to the side before they ram into you, and that's kind of what we did there. Against Citizen Shandy here, we get kind of lucky that they rammed us, but they took the brunt of it. So when they're in a spin, we just try and really lay down the law. And yeah, we became an ace this game, which is pretty good. And then we're hopefully going to move on to our final kill. So this next example is showing you a bit about mouse and keyboard use with this loadout and how it is completely ineffective. You will see both reticles separate from each other, and what you are actually seeing is one gimbaled weapon and one non-gimbaled weapon. So the weapon that moves with my mouse will be the 9 series longswords, which are on the counter turret on the nose, and the non-gimbal weapon, which would be the diamond-shaped weapon there, is only following the nose of the ship. So you're pretty much only hitting with those fairly ineffective 9 series longswords. So this loadout is not recommended for mouse and keyboard users. Just going back to that a little bit, the reason that it is a ineffective loadout is the size of the weapons. So the wing mounts on the Hornet can only take size 2 gimbals, and the GT220s are size 3 weapons. So therefore they need to remain stock. And there was a pretty good match for us, 11-3. The next closest person to us was a 5-5 player. So all in all, the loadout's pretty effective, but mainly the GT220s are the culprit for most of the kills. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and yeah, like this video if you liked it. Subscribe to this video if you want to see more things like tested. So thank you very much, guys, and I will see you next time.